The Terrifying Lies Podcast, with music and stories by Craig Nybo. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Terrifying Lies Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Nybo. It's difficult to believe for me, but here we are at the end of Season 6 of the Terrifying Lies Podcast. When I began this project a couple of years ago, I committed to 8 seasons before deciding whether it was a success. In all honesty, I've enjoyed the process of creating this series, but it has not performed up to my expectations. I am extremely appreciative to those of you who have listened thus far. In fact, I can't express my gratefulness enough. At the end of each season, I evaluate whether or not it is worth moving forward with another series. Honestly, this is a pretty significant debate as these episodes take an incredible amount of time to produce by myself. The podcast, in the face of so much competition out there, really hasn't landed and established the foundation it needs to proceed. I'm at a crossroads now. The fact is, there's a third part to the trilogy of the Pan-Galactic Prom Show. After some pretty serious soul-searching, in fact, I've decided to put in the time to produce it. So, the good news for you is, I plan to put together at least one more season to wrap up this whole space opera adventure. However, I might take my time doing it. In the meantime, I'll release a few goodies. There are some unreleased freestyle gargoyle performances I'd like to share. And look for some interesting intra-season episodes. I might talk about projects on which I'm working. I might share a few passages from those projects. But hang on, because Terrifying Lies Season 7 will come eventually. But for now, enjoy this, the finale of Season 6. If you are interested in trying to keep this show alive, the best way, of course, is to support the Patreon. Even a $5 per month donation, that's less than half of a McDonald's value meal, would greatly help. Also, if you can share the podcast with your friends, maybe share your favorite episode on your social networks, that would help build the foundation. Lastly, leave a positive review wherever you listen. Spotify helps. Apple Podcasts helps. Anywhere helps. I would greatly appreciate any support you can give. Well, enough of this. Let's get on with what you came here for. Tonight's story is entitled Poison Nickels Across the Universe, Part 10 of 10. The conclusion. Warning. This is the conclusion of a 10-part story. If you start now, you will definitely be confused. I recommend you go back and start with Part 1. So far, on Poison Nickels Across the Universe, on the brink of extinction at the hands of their mortal enemies, the voles, an alien race called the Ice Beetles, in a desperate play, sends out a small squad of their finest to recruit allies to help with their cause. While in space, the 5 Ice Beetles learn about something called rock and roll. They also learn about a huge event called the Pan-Galactic Prom Show. With the help of a friend they meet along the way, they put all the pieces in place to become a famous rock band and open up the prom show. Amazed when they get the gig, they travel to the Collindrome, the biggest rock and roll venue in the universe, for this engagement. Now, in the venue and poised to play, the Poison Nickels anticipate hitting the stage, hoping that their newfound fame will bring sympathy for their cause and enlist help to defeat their enemies and save their race from utter extinction. I now give you Poison Nickels Across the Universe, Part 10 of 10, the conclusion. I'll see you on the other side with a brand new song. Packerhound spent the remainder of the day editing digital assets he had gleaned from the collective databases of the blood drive and the USS Arlington. He worked out a few holes in the show using demo tracks he had taped during the Poison Nickels' rehearsals sync video with electronic stage effects. In his mind, the show was coming together, but with Arrowheart's marginal at best first impression of their sound, Packerhound knew his work had been cut out for him. Unless the Poison Nickels music enticed at least 30% of the prom show crowd, a ratio that Packerhound had no way of predicting, it would fall to the visual elements of the show to put the band on the rails and send them on a bona fide tour across the stars. Packerhound's visitor chime sounded. He looked up from the video screens at the door. Who could be calling now? He pushed off from his workstation and ambled to the door. He punched the video peep monitor button to catch a glimpse of his visitor. Gorn's face popped up on the door's flat panel. Packerhound smiled and punched the entry button, sending the door hissing open. The look in Gorn's eyes caused Packerhound to drop his smile. Without a word, she moved into his room. She stood facing away from him for a long moment. Packerhound gave her space. Finally, she turned to him.
Do you think they'll like us?
Gorn asked.
Well, it's hard to say. Like I told you, with so many aliens coming from so far away, musical tastes vary.
I don't think Mr. Arrowheart liked us at all.
Packerhound looked Gorn up and down. His mouth curved into a smile.
Why don't you sit down?
Packerhound said. Gorn found a comfortable spot on one of Packerhound's couches. He sat across from her and looked into her melanin eyes.
I know you've worked hard on these songs.
I've poured my soul into them, and the souls of every ice beetle back on Hull, who's counting on us to come back with help.
No artist likes to have her work scoffed at,
Packerhound said. Gorn looked down at the floor. Packerhound spent a moment to think about what he could say to encourage Gorn. He took one of her rakes in his hands. Her spicules jittered at his touch. She looked up at his blue face and tilted her head to the side.
For guys like Slink Arrowheart, everything comes down to dollars and cents. He probably hates the music of his headlining act, but it doesn't prevent him from flying Funk Toast all the way out from Earth to play for his crowd. He's not an artist. You can't take his opinion as artistic criticism. He's coming at you from a totally different place.
Gorn scooted closer on the couch to Packerhound.
Your music is a personal thing that only you can truly understand,
Packerhound said.
It came from your heart, so during the show, deliver your songs and words straight from your soul, as the best you can do. If perchance the crowd doesn't react with enthusiasm, just remember that your songs belong to you, not to them.
Gorn leaned on Packerhound's shoulder. Packerhound put one of his blue arms around her. They sat that way for a while. Although her tough shell cut off the circulation in his arm, Packerhound couldn't escape the feeling that being with Gorn felt right. They sat in silence until Packerhound lost all feeling in his hand. He turned and kissed her once on the pincer. Her spicules jittered as he drew away.
You have to let me get to work. I have a lot to do before you hit the stage, and I'm gonna need every minute I have to get it done.
Would you mind if I stay here in your room?
Gorn asked. Packerhound turned to her, his expression blank for a moment. A smile came to him, as if the grandest idea of all had just entered his mind.
Absolutely. Tell you what, if you're tired, use the bed. I can rest on the couch.
If it's all the same to you, I'll take the couch. It's more comfortable on the shell.
You've got a deal,
Packerhound said, pointing in the air with a blue finger.
Now I've got to get busy.
Gorn nodded. Packerhound went back to work. Gorn drifted off to sleep on the couch. Every few minutes as Packerhound worked his way through the footage and digital system cues, he looked over his shoulder at Gorn. Every glance at the ice beetle chanter acted like fuel for Packerhound. Frame by frame, cut by cut, he moved through the performance's audio and visual. It wouldn't be perfect, but Packerhound felt that it would be good enough. The Poison Nickels waited backstage. The Grand Hall Arena rocked with energy. Schulp had pumped exotic music from every corner of the known universe into the hall. keeping the audience engaged right up until the moment Slink Arrowheart took the stage, brought on by a wash of applause. The Poison Nickels rocked back and forth, waiting for their big moment. None of the band had met the headlining act. They had heard some rumble among the stagehands about how lazy Funk Toast had been during their sound check, and how inconceivable it was that they could manage to get by as a band with a frontman who was scared of trapdoors, fruit, antique wood, horizontal lines, and pufferfish.
Ladies and gentlemen and creatures from all over the known universe,
Slink said from stage center.
I present straight from the battle-tattered planet Hull.
Chi, Gorn, Winkle, Nasher, and Stig all stood up, as straight as they could. They looked at one another, dressed in bright colored serapes provided by Packerhound. Chi nodded at his friends, resolute. The others steeled their expressions. It was time to play. There was no going back now, and love it or hate it, the crowd of Pan-Galactic Prom Show fans was about to experience for the first time the music of Planet Hull. Slink went on.
I give you the liaisons of a race of creatures hunted and killed in magnitude by their most bitter enemies. I give you the Poison Nickels.
Slink gestured toward the stage wing with 4 of his tentacles. Chi led the band out onto the platform. The crowd exploded into a cacophony of welcoming noises, some applauding, some wafting out disgusting noises from their backsides, some belching, some slapping themselves with plant-like appendages, some shouting, some screaming, some stomping, some jumping up and down, some inflating their heads and letting them repeatedly pop. They were excited, and they were ready to hear the music of an obscure race known as the Ice Beetles from the planet Hull. The Poison Nickels took their places behind their instruments. Gorn looked over her shoulder at the others. She counted off the show opener. The band jumped in, playing their instruments with uncanny accuracy, as if the spirit of Taich, the god of ice, had fallen upon them. Gorn looked at the crowd as they played. To her chagrin, they just stood there, dumbfounded as the Poison Nickels music filled the Grand Hall arena. She wondered what was wrong. A few of the attendees even put appendages over their hearing apparatuses to keep the sound out. She began to lose heart. They'd worked so hard for this moment, and now that they were here, the prom show crowd looked as if they were not going to accept Poison Nickels' music, much less their message. As the Nickels neared a short rest just before a powerful bridge in the song they were playing, Gorn wondered if it might be better to stop altogether and walk off the stage. She glanced over her shoulder at Chi and saw the same forlorn look on her commander's face. But he nodded, indicating for her to find the strength to carry on. Gorn bolstered herself up with as much fraudulent confidence as she could muster. In many ways, this was becoming more difficult than even the most furious battle with the Vols back on Hull. She would see it through from beginning to end. Finally, the short rest before the bridge came up and the band went silent. At the exact moment the music stopped, all of the lights went off. For an instant, Gorn wondered if somehow the Collindrome had lost power. She leaned into her microphone, ready to scream out the phrase that would bring the rest of the band back in for the climax of the song. She half expected her equipment to fail along with the lights. She positioned her pincers and belted out her long scream on cue. Her equipment didn't fail. Not only that, the whole place lit up so brightly that everyone in the hall had to shade his or her eyes. The flash even caught the Poison Nickels off guard. After the flash, right there above the sea of prom show attendees, something magnificent happened. First, a small green orb appeared, spinning over the crowd's heads. The orb grew as the Poison Nickels worked their way through the changes of their song. As the orb became larger, Gorn recognized it as the planet Hull. Her emotions nearly overtook her as she looked upon its emerald magnificence, accented with tendrils of cloud cover. The holograph caused a new energy to rise within her. She angled into her microphone and attacked the next portion of the song, screaming out the war atrocities lodged by the Vols in all the gory details. straight from her and the other members of the band's experience. The holograph turned into a camera point-of-view flyover of the jungle of Hull. All eyes in the Grand Hall Arena turned to the dazzling display of special effects. Mouths fell ajar as the crowd watched the spectacle unfold. The camera's viewpoint dove into an ice cavern where it found a settlement of ice beetles going about life. Families spending time together, workers excavating new cave tunnels, children playing games. A rumble overtook the scene. The 3D animated ice beetles looked up from their activities in sudden fear. The Voles came, spilling into the ice cavern, picking up beetles and bashing them against stalagmites, biting through shells to get at beetle flesh and hemolymph. Packerhound had exaggerated the Voles' anatomy. His animated rodents stood nearly 10 times their actual size and fixed them with tusks instead of teeth. Elongated their claws and caused their eyes to glow in pale amber. The effect worked. Prom show spectators backed away in fear of the animated monsters. Some of the audience even screamed. Every aspect of the display synced up perfectly with the Poison Nichols' sound. The song commenced from refrain to refrain, from verse to bridge to chorus, until at the end, Nasher beat his Gollin drum with every ounce of ferocity he employed during battle. Stig accented the percussive thunk with textural chirps from his channel arch. Winkle drove a deep frequency sawtooth pad into the groove with his tone weaver. Chi added a manically pitched warble with his underply. The mesh of sound and noise set up a perfect place for Gorn, the Poison Nichols' chanter, to issue forth the tocsin. During rehearsal, Gorn had sent her tocsin through her instrument's signal processing hardware. She loved the ambiance of the highly effective version of her war cry. But as she looked over the audience of prom show fans, she decided on a different tact. She stepped around the tocsin and moved downstage to the front of the platform, as close as she could get to the fans. Stig and Nasher looked at each other, confused. This was nothing like rehearsal. But Nasher noticed the expectant expressions on both Chi and Winkle's faces, and he realized what was about to happen. He and Stig went back to their instruments, keeping the groove alive for Gorn. Gorn concentrated on her deepest biological functions. She felt her glands inject hormones into her hemolytic stream. She felt power rise to the place in her chest where she built her tocsin. When all of the biological elements within her body became harmonious, she opened her throat and wailed out her grandest call. Without a microphone, without signal processing, completely natural, from the depths of her body, through the open air and into the hearing apparatuses of 100 alien races, she released her battle tocsin. Her abdomen glowed, ramping from pale green to violent red. Along with her cry came the psychological effects of the gift Tyche, the god of ice, had given her. The audience leaned toward her, drawn in by her call, feeling waves of it wash into their bodies, into their souls. For the first time in intergalactic history, races other than the warrior ice beetles of planet Hull felt the quickening effect of the chanter's tocsin. Some even swooned, overcome by the effects of it. Others closed their eyes and hugged themselves, taking in every nuance of the sound and its accompanying psychological urges. Gorn kept her tocsin going. She continued the call until she felt the cords in her chest tearing, nearing their breaking point. She let off slowly, fading the volume back over an undying groove kept up by the rest of her band. Then she let go and the band stopped playing. The Grand Hall Arena rested in quiet stasis, all eyes on the Poison Nichols. After nearly a full minute of silence, someone in the back of the room began to clap. The applause traveled across the Grand Hall Arena until nearly all of the alien creatures rallied to send their love toward the obscure arthropod band from planet Hull. Gorn waited for the crowd's mixture of appreciative noise to die down. She leaned into her microphone and thanked them for accepting the message of the ice beetles. It became clear, the crowd rocked back and forth in anticipation, that they wanted more. Gorn glanced over her shoulder at the rest of the band. She raised her eye bones. New energy flowed into her. She nodded toward Nasher, flicking her eyes at the set list, displayed on a flat screen in the floor at Nasher's feet. Nasher glanced at the monitor and smiled. It was time to play his favorite song, Ice Freakazoids. The Poison Nickels had given Packerhound creative license on the track title. Nasher counted off the groove with a series of taps on one of his Gollendrum sensors, and the band launched into the song. The Poison Nickels made their way through the set list, song after song with few errors. The crowd seemed to like most of the music, but above and beyond the music, they latched on to Packerhound's ingenious display of footage, holographic images and sound effects triggered from his backstage workstation. The Poison Nickels kept the audience rapt for the duration of their set. After their final note, the audience stomped and shouted out their appreciation. As Chi watched them yell and gyrate, clapping and slapping, screaming and whistling, he looked up through a small iris-shaped port in the center of the Grand Hall Arena's ceiling, where he could see a patch of space speckled with star pinholes. In the midst of the crowd's rumble, Chi sent up a prayer of thanks to Taich, the god of ice, for granting him and his little detachment of Shriver warriors the might to accomplish what they had done that night at the Pan-Galactic Prom Show. As he looked out into the crowd of alien faces, he felt hope that the Poison Nickels would soon return to their world with enough aid to secure safety for their species. As the Poison Nickels walked off the stage, they met the Funk Toast Band. After spending so much time researching Earth records on the USS Arlington, the Poison Nickels expected more. 8 odd-looking aliens made up the group. They were dressed in bright colors, their internal organs covered with some kind of tan gelatinous substance. They emitted an odd smell, reminiscent of plant oils mingled with decomposing flesh. One of the Funk Toasters clapped Nasher on the shell, uninvited. Nasher bristled and nearly attacked out of reflex. The Funk Toaster said something in his airy language, but in the noise of the crowd, the translation protocol failed. A stagehand used a flashlight to escort the Poison Nickels down a case of stairs to a green room where Packerhound waited for them, accompanied by an alien creature, a tubby being topped with an elongated head and tufts of what looked like swamp moss over most of his body. Before the Poison Nickels had even a moment to celebrate their victory, Packerhound spoke up.
Gorn, Stig, Chi, Winkle, and Nasher, I'd like to introduce you to someone very special, who I met just before you went on.
The Poison Nickels collectively looked up at the odd creature's eyes, a pair of 2 close-together stones, deep set in a face of tallow skin.
This is Eddie Gleason. He's a cross-universal A&R man from the planet Frilf. I told him before the show that he was going to love everything about you. I'm glad to say that you didn't make me a liar.
Eddie lumbered forward, extending one of his bulky stumps.
Pleased to meet the 5 of you. You have a crump of a story on your hands, boys.
Chi looked down at Eddie's extended appendage. Then he remembered the ceremony of hospitality Packerhound had taught him. He reached out with one of his rakes and shook Eddie's stump. Eddie smiled and brought something out with his other hand, a digital screen with a stylus protruding from a mount in its side.
Tell you what, there's no rest for the talented. I got an engagement in White Lake City at a joint called Dirk's Freaky Lounge. It ain't the Collindrome, but you only get one shot like this in a lifetime. Now you gotta start small and work your way up, drafting off from that shebang of a show you guys just put on. If I can get the 5 of yous to sign on the dotted line, I could take you places you never dreamed of.
Chi glanced over his shoulder at the others. They looked back at him, granting their concession to his discretion. Chi looked at Packerhound.
Is this creature honest?
Packerhound smiled, broad and inviting.
He's as honest as any A&R man out there.
You heard your friend,
Eddie said.
I'm as honest as any A&R man out there. Now what do you say you sign and I make your dreams come true?
My dream is to bring aid back to my species and save our kind from extinction.
Chi said.
Yeah, that too.
Eddie said, and pushed the tablet even further into Chi's face. Chi took the stylus and marked the screen with his icon. One by one, the other members of the Poison Nickels followed suit, putting their own marks on the digital contract. "When do we leave?" Winkle asked as he finished his mark and handed the tablet back to Eddie.
Immediately. The show, as they say, must go on, and your engagement in White Lake City starts yesterday.
Eddie smiled and pumped Winkles' rake with his odd appendages, all the while escorting him toward the exit.
Attention all Andromedans. This station operates in linear spacetime. Please refrain from using hyperspace travel and communications.
The Poison Nickels sat on the bridge of the blood drive. Packerhound requested clearance to leave the station. They all looked at each other as they waited for the massive hangar door to finish sliding open. Everything had happened so quickly. The whole whirlwind had not allowed them even a moment to process what would come next. Even with the Pan-Galactic Prom Show still in progress, they were setting off for the next stop in their tour of the stars. The hangar door came to a lurching stop. Packerhound worked the controls of the blood drive and used pulse power to lift off. Eddie Gleason would not be coming along. He had told Packerhound that he couldn't leave the prom show. He had other business to conduct. He would catch up with the Poison Nickels via video link when they reached White Lake City. Packerhound worked the controls. The blood drive flew slowly out of the hangar doors into space, leaving the Colindrome behind.
What's that?
Chi asked, pointing through the observation screen into space. Packerhound looked up. His face went slack. He swallowed hard.
That is worst case scenario.
Packerhound said as he maneuvered the ship. He moved the blood drive slowly through space, as if he hadn't noticed the approaching spaceship. A behemoth, painted black and red with the emblem of Nolar Jex, the most ferocious pirate in the universe, monogrammed on its belly. Gar and Enid had welched out on a deal with Nolar years ago and spent the rest of their miserable lives running from the so-called Pirate King. Could it be possible that Jex had sent a ship after them to collect? Didn't make sense. The ship moving toward the Colindrome was huge. Overkill for a track and collect mission. But still, Packerhound's heart beat heavily as he guided the blood drive along the exit lane away from the hangar. Nolar's ship didn't bother hailing the blood drive. The Pirate King had other business. The blood drive slipped away into space. Packerhound breathed a sigh of relief as he punched the coordinates to White Lake City into the navigational system. With everything set, he engaged the hyperlight speed engines. The blood drive shot into space, leaving the Colindrome and Nolar Jex's massive destroyer behind. One year later, somewhere on planet Hull, the haunted caverns with all of their night terrors, creeping things, and moans from the netherworld proved to be an advantageous location for General Nishang and his colony. The Vols stayed away from the wastelands, even at the cost of not confronting their bitterest enemies, the ice beetles. But the wasteland caverns wrought other challenges for the colony. Nishang had watched many of his beetles die, some of terror, some of a plague that crawled through the haunted caverns. He'd watched them wither up, their bodies deteriorating until they were no longer able to stand. Finally, the plague took them. Nishang had long since become tired of burying his friends and family. Often, when he found an isolated moment, he stepped out of the caves to look up at the stars. He wondered just what had happened to Chi and his small detachment of Shrievers. Sometimes, as he looked into space, he felt faith in his heart that Chi would not let them down. But as time passed and more of his countrymen fell to the plague, his optimism waned. He'd sent 6 different expeditions to find suitable ice caverns. Only one of those 6 had returned, and they'd brought news that the Vols had flourished and were occupying any newly discovered caves. A bleak night found General Nishang sitting in his quarters writing. He logged the newly dead, 200 that day. The death toll had surpassed the hatchery rate. It was a matter of time before the colony would die out altogether. He'd done everything he could to protect the colony. That was the only thing that offered any relief from despair. If the colony went extinct, it was only after grievous sacrifice of time, resources, and most of all, ice beetle lives. If it was time for his species to become extinct, let it be the will of Taich, the god of ice. He finished his notes and placed the log in a masonry safe in the corner of his room. If the ice beetles became extinct, he would not see all records of their existence destroyed. At least there would be a book of accounts for some other intelligent race to find. The stories of faith and bravery would not die with the ice beetles. General Nisheng left the haunted caverns for a solitary overland walk. The night greeted him, an expanse of stars, both bright and dim, close and distant, looked down on him from the frozen sky. He never tired of the beauty of the night, even here in the wastelands. Night covered the blight and ruin. Darkness draped a shroud over pain, scars, plague, and enemies, all of the factions that had gibbeted the ice beetle's former greatness. Nisheng found the rock on which he usually sat to look up at the stars. He rested his shell on its gritty surface. He might sleep here under the night sky. He'd made a habit of it lately. His advisors warned him repeatedly of the dangers of going outside alone. The colony needed him. Nisheng ignored their advice. The ice beetles were dying. If the voles came for Nisheng, so be it. But since coming to the wastelands, Nisheng hadn't seen so much as a vole track in the sand. The shooting star traced a path across space. Nisheng allowed himself to smile. The star left a remarkably long and bright tail. Then the shooting star did something unexpected. It changed course. Nisheng leapt to his feet, instinctively taking on a fighting stance. More objects appeared in space, all of them moving in deliberate directions. Nisheng sprinted back to the cavern entrance and found the sentry on duty, a hulking ice beetle named Kark. Nisheng ordered Kark to sound a general alarm. Ships were approaching. Within seconds, the haunted caverns resounded with shrill cries from a series of electronic speakers. The Shrievers woke, donned their battle gear, and made their way to their stations. A detachment of general infantry moved out into the night. Less soldiers than Nisheng wanted. The plague had taken so many. Artillery beetles mounted their weapons and trained them on the advancing spacecrafts, 6 in all. Nisheng told them to hold their fire, but to stand ready. The entire Shriever battalion stood by as the ships approached. The vessels glided into the atmosphere, burning bright as they penetrated the stratosphere and neared the planet. Nisheng stood on a knoll and held his breath, his compod in one rake, ready to give the order to open fire. After a tenuous wait, the ships moved into view, gliding on anti-gravitational propulsion. Each ship was marked with its own separate insignia. The ships did not belong to a single battalion. The lead ship, a hulking mammoth painted with bright colors and festooned with parti-colored lights, settled on the wasteland pan. Dust fanned in all directions as it came to rest in the middle of the clearing, a spontaneous landing pad.
Hold your positions,
Nisheng said into his compod. Something hissed on the front of the ship. The door yawned open, turning into a ramp, extending from the ship's girth to the ground. A port sliced open in the top of the ramp, revealing a huddle of figures, backlit silhouettes, faces in shadow. The beings moved out into the night, descending the ramp. They wore strange coverings, fluorescent colored weaves wrapped over the shoulders, dark apparatuses covering their eyes. As the beings, 5 in all, made their way down the long ramp, Nisheng stepped forward, lowering his fighting stance, dropping his compod back into his exoskeletal pouch.
It can't be,
He said to himself. He moved forward. Someone behind him shouted his name. Nisheng ignored the warning and walked toward the ship. As Nisheng neared the 5 figures, they recognized him, all of them clicking their spicules in delight. One of them, a chanter, issuing a light purr of anticipation. They met Nisheng in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by what remained of the Shriever army.
General Nisheng.
Chi said, saluting by placing a rake to his head and bending forward, his bright-colored weave moving in the breeze.
We return with help.
General Nishang looked the little company over, his eye bones raised, one rake of spicules slowly undulating. Not only did Chi and his little company don the multicolored weaves, they wore copious amounts of paint and other ornaments.
Where have you been?
General Nishang asked, unable to form any better sentence.
Pardon our appearance.
Chi said, lowering his salute.
In the midst of gathering aid for our cause, we've become famous throughout the universe. What?
General Nishang said.
We are a rock and roll band, sir.
Chi said.
Intergalactic entertainers. There's hardly an alien race who doesn't know about Ho and the Ice Beetles.
General Nishang stepped back, looking his old friends up and down in confusion.
We call ourselves the Poison Nickels, sir.
Nasher said.
You say you've brought aid?
General Nishang asked.
Enough to wipe out the Vols entirely, sir.
Chi said.
Or, if you like, we could recolonize on a different planet. Leave Hull altogether, sir.
General Nishang fixed each of the Poison Nickels with considerate glances. He turned away from the band and their ships and looked into the faces of his diminishing Shrievers. He folded his rakes in front of his chest and kicked a pebble. Not a sound from the mass of ice beetles convoluted the snicking of the pebble as it rolled and clicked over the hard pan. General Nishang stood his full height. He clacked his pincers a couple of times. He took another lingering glance at the Poison Nickels. He turned to his Shrievers and raised his two topmost rakes into the air.
Soldiers of the Order of Shrievers,
General Nishang said.
Get your families. It's time to celebrate. We are free beetles.
Someone in the back of the ranks began clicking his spicules. Others followed suit. Soon the entire battalion became a bedlam of clicking and snicking. Gorn bared her wings and flew up above the clearing, issuing her tocsin. Her abdomen glowed a cool green color that soothed the hearts of all assembled. 10 other chanters followed her up into the sky, offering their own tocsins and illumination. A new dawn of peace for the ice beetles of planet Hull had begun. Over the next 3 days, every ice beetle evacuated the haunted caverns. Mobs of arthropod populace boarded the Poison Nickels' ships. Load by load, Packerhound carried them to a lush forest hundreds of miles away, a place the Poison Nickels had rake-selected. Voluminous trees fixed with hanging vines guarded the area like sentinels. Thousands of leaves in the most succulent varieties stood on stalks ready for the picking. As shipload after shipload of ice beetles set rakes down in the area, a new sense of emancipation settled over them. They picked from the bountiful stores of living food. They ate, they crawled through the languid grass, they touched each other, they bathed in a clear ice brook, washing away the remainder of wastelands and of the haunted caverns. One night, as the ice beetles lounged under the stars, letting the night pass away in lazy minutes, Packerhound engaged a series of hydraulic mechanisms on one of the ships. A portion of the ship unfolded and laid down flat across the ground. From 5 hissing ports, the ice beetles' instruments emerged on floating discs. The band made their way to their instruments. One by one, the eyes of their fellow ice beetles settled on them as they picked up the mechanisms Stig had designed so long ago. Gorn raised the orb of her toxinanon to her pincers.
For General Nishang, and for the rest of the ice beetles at Planet Hull, we bring a special concert, one that we have waited for a long time to play. We give you for the first time, to the ice beetles, the music of the ice beetles.
Nasher began a steady beat on his Gollin drum. The rest of the Poison Nickels settled into the groove. Gorn sang her pure lyrics into her instrument, not abstracted by the algorithms of foreign language translator protocols. For the first time, the Poison Nickels performed a concert in their own native tongue, for those whom they most loved, for those who understood what it meant to be ice beetles and to finally live in peace. I wrote this song from the point of view of this strange ice beetle rock band. I call it Hell on Hull, and it has everything to do with the story if you've been listening. I thought about what alien music might sound like. I thought about their sensibility from the story. They have handmade instruments and a lack of formal training. From the beginning, they didn't even know what rock and roll was. I used zero AI during any part of producing this song. I'm a composer. I played all the instruments either acoustically or on a keyboard when using synthesized sounds. Enjoy the song. Thank you for listening. Again, the best way to keep this show on the air is to tell your friends about it. Share your favorite episode on your social media. If you're feeling extra generous, join the Patreon for even $5 per month. Every bit helps. Till next time, I bid you sweet dreams. Or should I say, sweet nightmares. The Terrifying Lies Podcast, with music and stories by Craig Nybo.